This is Philosophy and Logic. This is course GNS 105. You are here to learn more about this course, which will definitely benefit you in your life. We'll be going through in the next 3 lectures. We're going to see the overview of philosophy, definition of scope of philosophy, methods of philosophy, branches of philosophy, philosophy and other disciplines, the usefulness of philosophy, sources of knowledge and criteria for knowing, history and development of philosophy, the ancient age of philosophy, definition and scope of logic. We're going to look at logic's vocabularies. When we come to a point where we can invalidate deductive and inductive arguments. So at the end, we're looking at fallacies, definitions, and types. Not only that, argument, forms, and law of thought. Then possibly some questions for you to look at. Philosophy and logic. We'll be looking at the origin. The origin of philosophy is rooted in the origin of the state. The state is not a mere assemblage of people upon a certain territory. It is an assemblage of people upon a certain territory with a purpose, which is to live the good life. The good life we're talking about, according to people, is always determined and defined by their ideology, implicitly and explicitly. The totality of the laws, the morals, and the cultural practices of our people are a function of their ideology. Therefore, philosophy and religion are at the service of ideology. Don't forget, philosophy and religion are at the service of ideology. Philosophy and religion are same enterprise with different methodologies. Now, both of them aim at the preservation of the ideology and purpose of the state. I want you to understand that sometimes the attainment of the purpose of the state requires a fundamental change or a modification in the ideology. Philosophy does this easier than religion for philosophy. It's by methodology amenable to change, while religion is by methodology resistant to change. Having said that, I want you to come along with me this moment so that you'll be able to have a very clear picture of what philosophy is all about. And when we are talking about philosophy, the origin point behind religion is that why philosophy seeks the realization of the good life of the state relies solely on religion seeks the good life for the state rely solely on faith in a given revelation. So, philosophy regarding religion is based on faith. The reliance of religion on revelation, which is a temporal event of a certain era, makes it resistant to change. For revelation is not a continuous event. It is not dynamic. Don't forget, it is not dynamic. Revelation, once documented, can not be altered. Hence, any event unforeseen by the revelation becomes an automatic source of tension to the religion that results from such a revelation. So therefore, philosophy, on the other hand, is open-ended and dynamic. It does not lay claim to any revelation or any doctrine or teaching as the final truth. So philosophy indeed celebrates change and responds to any new event with a new philosophy. That is the difference between religion and philosophy. So religion is based on faith, and anything documented, it can be changed. But when it comes to philosophy, if there's a new event that comes up, it has to follow that trend. Much of the history of philosophy is the essence of knowing what is happening in the area of religion. So philosophy and religion are the same enterprise with different methodologies. Don't forget, both of them aim at preservation of ideology and purpose of the state. I want to entrench that sometimes the attainment of the purpose of the state requires a fundamental change or a modification in the ideology. Philosophy does this easier than religion, for philosophy is by methodology amenable to change, while religion is by methodology resistant to change. Don't forget that. So much of the history of philosophy is the history of the tension between philosophy and religion. They are like the two opposite ends of a straight line. The cross of the tension is the interpretation of truth. Don't forget, the challenge that is there is the issue of interpretation of truth. For religion, truth is static. It is a revelation. As it was in the beginning, it is now, and ever shall be. Philosophy, on the other hand, sees truth as dynamic. It changes. It welcomes changes. So the cosmos is therefore characterized by change. The truth about cosmos must necessarily be characterized by change. To the question, why? What is philosophy? The answer may be like, philosophy is the enterprise at the service of the society that seeks the truth about the good life and the cosmos using the sole power of reason. By the time we come to the point of reasoning, in this lecture, you tend to see the difference. By stating that philosophy is an enterprise, it is hereby emphasized that it is a deliberate endeavor. By stating that it is at the service of the society, it is hereby emphasized that philosophy does not happen in vacuum. Philosophy is not an abstract exercise, but a community endeavor that is at the service of the society. Therefore, philosophy seeks the truth about the good life, for the state exists essentially to live the good life. The organization of the state reflects its understanding of the good life. Note that philosophy seeks to prescribe for individuals as well as the state the conducts that will guarantee the good life. Philosophy seeks the truth about the cosmos. Philosophy is ambitious of interpreting the cosmos in bits and as a whole. Whenever the interpretation of a particular aspect of the cosmos becomes too complex and too technical for philosophy to handle, while attempting to understand the cosmos as a whole, philosophy leaves it for a branch of science to handle. It rather relies on the information provided by the specialists in that field of science and places it in that perspective in its interpretation of the cosmos. Why religion is not so. To be able to live the good life, man must know his place in the cosmos, for he is a part and parcel of the cosmos. It is the cosmos that he has his being. His fate is tied to the fate of the cosmos. If the cosmos is a divine project intended for a divine purpose, man has to discover this divine purpose, interpret it, understand it, attune his life to it. If not, he will have problem with the cosmos. It is the position of the religion that the cosmos is a divine project. History, however, shows that the priestly class has always claimed the monopoly of the knowledge, interpretation of this divine purpose. They normally claim a revelation of this purpose to one of their own, who they variously refer to as founder, demigod, or demigod, a god, a prophet. In some religions, this revelation is written down and taken as the final authority or arbiter. Hence, they suppress any ideology which is a name maker to their interpretation of the cosmos or their revelation. So you need to come to this understanding in this class. I want you to understand that philosophy, on the other hand, rejects revelation entirely. Even when philosophies hold that the cosmos is a divine project, they do not bequeath the interpretation of the nature and purpose of the project to any revelation or to the priestly class. At all times, they hold the project discoverable and accountable to reason. Philosophers have not always attributed the cosmos to a god. Sometimes they attributed the cosmos to nature, and to the tension and chagrin of the priestly class interpreted the cosmos accordingly. So philosophy is said to have originated in Miletus in the present-day Greece. The first philosopher was said to be Thales of Miletus, but these assertions are actually Western biases. Thales himself admits that he traveled to Egypt to be tutored in philosophy. If Thales went to Egypt to learn philosophy, it meant there must have been a school of philosophy in Egypt. There must have been teachers and students of philosophy in that school. Therefore, Thales could not have been the first philosopher in recorded history. It should rather be said Thales was the first recorded philosopher in the Western world. The West here means Western Europe and North America, United States of America and Canada. Rather than Miletus popularly told by the Western bias, formerly philosophy actually originated in Egypt. Until the destruction of Egyptian culture by the Islamic Revolution in the 7th century, the coastal town of Alexandria, which was then the capital of Egypt, flourished in culture and learning. The school of Alexandria was a flourishing hub of learning. It is tragedy that most of the writings housed in Alexandria did not survive the vicissitudes of history. Philosophy and science, therefore, had been indeed flourishing in Egypt long before Thales philosophized in Miletus. The eclipse of the sun, which Thales predicted, was an art he learned in Egypt. The Egyptians measured the length of pyramids by measuring the shadow it cast at the time. The shadow cast on the body is equal to a person's height. So therefore, unlike Europe, where the philosophic exercise was individualistic, in Egypt it was rather communal. In the history of Western philosophy, philosophers strive to personalize the philosophic enterprise. There are frequent cases of individuals modifying communal knowledge in a bid to personalize credit. So therefore, let's take for instance right now the assertion that all things came from water was a common assumption at the time of Thales. Yet he personalized it in African philosophy. However, knowledge is viewed as a property of the community. There were no such attempts at personalizing the credit of knowledge which is there in the community. Even when the such knowledge is modified or improved upon, it is done for the community. It is not presented as a new idea by an individual. But the reverse is the case in the Western of tradition. The communal nature of African philosophy deprives it of the kind of individualism that characterized philosophy in the Western tradition. Therefore, it was this kind of individualism that gave it of originality for merely writing down what the community already believed. The second factor that downplayed Egyptian philosophy was the burning of books in the Alexandria libraries by the conquering Mohammedans, who overran Egypt culture. The destruction of Alexandria writings and the absence of the art of writing in most African literary traditions led to the collapse of the communal credit mode knowledge transmission and the subsequent success and supremacy of Western individualistic model, which is in use today. Suffice saying that I want the student what I want the student to understand is, as you are listening, as we continue in this lecture, in this class, the student must be conscious and wary of the bias in Western literature. Every information you are having, you must be conscious and wary of the bias in Western literature. The experience of slavery and colonialism led to the degrading of everything African. Colonial literature view Africans as inferior humans who are incapable of philosophy. Hence, the Western bias is ascribing the origin of philosophy to Greece rather than Egypt, despite overwhelming library evidence. Every author writes from a value system and for an audience. Therefore, the bias of the value system and his audience will invariably filter through the writing. It is not surprising, therefore, that most books written by Western philosophers attribute the best of philosophy to the West. So, as we continue, I want you to be abreast with that. Don't be carried away by the biases of Western understanding on this. So, we'll look at the meaning of philosophy now. The term philosophy was coined by a philosopher mathematician known as Pythagoras. He formed the term from the two Greek words, philos, which means love, and sophia, which means wisdom. So philosophy literally means love of wisdom. It is pertinent to note that formal philosophy has existed for hundreds of years before Pythagoras gave it that name. In other words, he was not the first philosopher. He merely renamed a phenomenon which has been in existence. Philosophers who existed before him must have known philosophy by a certain name, certain names or some description. In Pythagoras' era, superstitions beliefs had sway. Philosophy was the much needed wisdom that will enable one to extricate oneself from the web of superstitions around which the conventional order has been woven. So note that mostly these superstitions are woven around conventional order as you begin to learn in this process. Know what philosophy is all about, what it meant. Knowing it will help you to be able to understand this course very well. So come along with me. Philosophy can mean different things in different contexts. That's what I want you to understand. Remember, I told you earlier on that the religion and philosophy, and the philosophy is not static. And when they tend to understand, they can interpret, they give it other discipline to be able to interpret, and they hold sway on that. So, for instance, everyone has a philosophy of life. In this context, philosophy means a set of principles or values that guides one's life. In the Bible, Paul charges his audience to beware of philosophy. In this concept, philosophy means atheism, an anti-Christian way of life. Sophistry and argumentativeness are sometimes termed as philosophy. Philosophy is in certain quarters regarded as stagnating and bending of meaningless attractions or abstractions. But philosophy is an inquiry. It is not methodic and rational inquiry into the ultimate causes of things. Philosophy goes beyond the face value of things and investigates their root causes. Don't forget that. Philosophy analyzes the relationship between things and the language of the investigation itself. The subject of matter of philosophy is reality. Therefore, philosophy investigates the ultimate causes of reality. Philosophy asks the question of why and how. It is the ambition of philosophy to give interpretation to reality as a whole, while different fields of study concern themselves with specific aspects of reality. Philosophy concerns itself with reality as a whole. For example, now, biology may explain in the parts of human body in detail, but it can never explain why the human body has its form in the first place. Biology, come to think of it, cannot why humans have a will and consciously make choices. Biology cannot come with those understanding, cannot come with those questions. It cannot explain what life is, neither can it pinpoint the actual location of life in the body. Biology cannot address the question whether man has a soul or not. It cannot answer the question whether life has a purpose or whether it is a meaningless exercise of chance. Philosophy attempts to address these questions in order to give humanity a deeper understanding of existence. Therefore, this one will lead us to categorizing of philosophy. For a better understanding, therefore, in this class, philosophy has been categorized into 5 branches. These divisions are not dogmatic as such. The divisions were made to enhance the understanding. What are these categorized or branches of philosophy? These are metaphysics. Number 2, epistemology. 3, logic. 4, ethics. And 5, aesthetics. Looking at metaphysics now, the term metaphysics comes from 2 Greek words, meta, which means after, and physica, which means physics. It was coined by Andronicus of Rhodes, who was the editor of Aristotle's works. Andronicus was at a loss on what to call the part of Aristotle's works which come from Aristotle's works on physics, as arranged in the book he was editing. So he called those works ta meta ta physica bili bibelia. That is, the books after the books on physics. That was how the term metaphysics came to be. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that studies being. Being, in this sense, can be regarded as an existence, as an entity. Therefore, metaphysics studies existence holistically. It studies existence as an entity. Don't forget, it studies holistically, it studies as an entity. Metaphysics studies its content. Metaphysics is divided into two: cosmology and ontology. Cosmology, this is the branch of metaphysics that studies the origin and the structure of the universe. It asks such questions as, what is the origin of the world? What is the nature of the cosmos? Does the world have a beginning or an end? Can the universe last forever? Has it any cause or is it an independent? While ontology, however, studies categories of being. It studies issues about being and modes of being. Ontology asks such questions as, what is life? What is the nature of man? What is the relationship between the mind and the body? Do we survive death? Is the mind spiritual or physical? Does man have a soul? Does it survive death? Is there anything like a God or God, etc., etc.? So, epistemology is the term that comes from two Greek words: episteme, which means knowledge, and logos, which means study. It is the branch of philosophy that deals with the theory of knowledge. It studies the nature and the extent of the human knowledge. Epistemology asks such questions as, what is knowledge? What is truth? What can be known? Is knowledge possible? Epistemology seeks to know the difference between appearance and reality. It seeks to distinguish knowledge and opinion, truth from belief. Epistemology also seeks to know whether the mind gives us an accurate picture of the world, or whether it has its own nature to knowledge of the world it gives us. Epistemology seeks to know the source of human knowledge. Let's come to this epistemology now and look at the school of thought. There are three schools of thought in epistemology: the rational school of thought, or rationalism, believes that knowledge can be got only through reason. But the empirical school of thought, or empiricism, believes that knowledge can be got only through the senses. I hope you are following. However, the skeptics or the statisticians believe that nothing can be known for certain. For the skeptics, certainly is war an illusion. For the skeptics, certainty is what? An illusion. So logic. The term logic comes from the Greek word logos, which can be translated into reason, word, study, or rationale. But in the philosophic sense, the term logic denotes rationale, justification, or reason. The term logic was introduced in philosophical discourse by a man called Zeno. Logic is the science of thought. It is the study of the laws of correct reasoning. It is the art that guides reasoning on the path of truth. The term logic connotes reason, rationale, justification, and study, because reasoning is all about providing justifications or rationales. Reasoning is done with words and communicated in words. Come to understand this. There's an inherent order in nature. That order is the logic of nature. There's an inherent order in reasoning. The order is logic. There cannot be any thinking without reasoning. There cannot be any reasoning without logic. Logic is that order upon which reasoning operates. If thinking is orderly, we say it is logical and rational. If thinking is disorderly, we say it is illogical and irrational. The thinking mind is guided by the order called logic. When the logic of the mind is faulty, the individual goes astray in errors. So therefore, logic is a systematic process of reasoning that establishes the cause of a conclusion or a line to the justification for truth. Logic is the science that studies reason. Every field of science is the study of logic. That particular field, that is, the product of logic as applied to that field, to that discipline. That is why almost every field of science has the suffix logic, L-O-G-Y, logic, affixed to it. Suffix logic stands for logic. It is the application of logic to that field that makes it scientific. You call it psychology, sociology, biology, just name it. Logic is divided into two, material logic and formal logic. Material logic deals with the logic that obtains when the conclusion obtained from the process of reason is correct and also true as things are in the world. Material logic demands that the conclusion be correct and also factually true. For instance, all animals reproduce. Man is a mammal. Therefore, man reproduces. Formal logic deals only with the correctness or coherence of the conclusion arrived from the process of reasoning. Unfortunately, an argument can be correct without being true. For instance, if you say right now all US presidents live in the White House, you say Michelle Obama lives in the White House. Therefore, Michelle Obama is a US president. Your argument above is coherent but untrue. Formal logic is solely concerned with the conformity to the rules of logic. But material logic is concerned both with the rules of logic and the truthfulness of the products of logic. We come to aesthetics now. Aesthetics and ethics are sometimes grouped together as a branch of philosophy called axiology. Aesthetic is the branch of philosophy that studies beauty. It deals with what appeals to the eyes and the ears. It asks such questions as what is beauty? What makes a thing beautiful? What are the properties or nature of beauty? Aesthetic studies the works of art. The term is derived from the Greek word aesthetikos, which means perception. Axiology is therefore from two Greek words, axia, which means value or worth, and logos, which means study. Ethics. The term ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, which means custom or habit. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that studies the principles of human action. Ethics deals with the morality of human actions. It deals with the values of good and evil. Ethics is preoccupied with prescribing the values that will enable man live the good life. Ethics investigates principles behind the norms and conventions of society. So that one will lead us to methods of philosophy. Just as there are 5 branches of philosophy, there are also 5 methods of philosophy or approaches through which a philosopher can embark on philosophical inquiry in any branch of philosophy. Therefore, these methods are not branches of philosophy, but styles through which a philosopher can philosophize in any branch of philosophy. They are, number 1, speculative, 2, analytic, 3, prescriptive, 4, humanetic, and 5, phenomenological methods. So speculative philosophy, this involves system building. It is the method of philosophy through which a philosopher establishes a grand principle and builds a system of philosophy on it. The philosopher makes hypotheses of possible sequence of events based on the established principle. For example, Plato's dualistic system of knowledge was built on the principle of forms. Analytical philosophy. This analytical method of philosophy is employed by philosophers who approach philosophical issues by breaking down complex systems into simple propositions. It involves analyzing the language of the issues in the contention into simpler forms. Prescriptive philosophy, therefore, is the method of philosophy usually employed in discussing ethical issues. It involves philosophers prescribing what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. That is why it's prescriptive. Humanistic philosophy, therefore, is the method of philosophy employed by philosophers dealing with complex issues of language, especially when the meaning of the word depends on the meaning of another word, and the meaning of that word depends on the meaning of the earlier word. It is the method favored by philosophers who embark on the interpretations of thorny philosophical issues. An element in a text can depend on the understanding of the entire text, while the understanding of the entire text presupposes the understanding of that very element. Take, for instance, now, look at it this way. One cannot understand clearly a particular event in a crisis without understanding the whole situation. But one cannot actually understand the whole situation without understanding the particular events that constitute the situation. Humanetics deals with paradoxes like this. Phenomenology, method of philosophy involves suspending all previously held biases and ideas and describing the contents of the consciousness as they appear to the consciousness. This is the method of philosophy used in investigating subjective experiences. Don't forget this. Very, very vital. And it will help you in dealing with matter and solving situations. Dimensions of philosophy. Just as philosophy has branches and methods, it also has dimensions. The dimensions of philosophy are like trajectories of philosophy. They are the applications of philosophy to other disciplines. Popular among them are the philosophy of law, the philosophy of science, the philosophy of mathematics. Philosophy of law. The philosophy of law studies the philosophical foundations of law, the justice or otherwise of law, the purpose of law, and the limitations of law. While lawyers interpret laws and judges make judgments on interpretations, the philosopher of law asks questions on the propriety of the law itself. I hope you are following this particular philosophy of law. Philosophy of law asks such questions as, who has the power to make laws? What makes a pronouncement a law? Because it has been pronounced thus by someone in authority or because it is just? What is the relationship between law and justice? Is the law made for man or man made for law? So the philosophy of science, before we close this lesson in a few more minutes, philosophy of science. The philosophy of science studies the philosophical foundations of science. It critiques the scientific method and sets values for science. The products of science affect man. Philosophy of science delves into argument whether science should flourish unchecked or whether it should be controlled lest it destroys man. Don't forget that the atom bomb is a product of science. Philosophy of mathematics. Philosophy of mathematics critiques the theorems of mathematics. Just before we run up, I want us to just quickly go through the usefulness of philosophy. I'll just mention them quickly now. And you need to go back and study them. And I'll be giving you as an assignment as we are coming back. The usefulness of philosophy. The study of philosophy helps us to enhance our ability to solve problems. Don't forget, it enhances us on our communication skills, on our persuasive powers, on our writing skills. So we'll be looking at some description of how philosophy helps to us to develop these various important skills. It helps us to bring about general problem-solving skills. The study of philosophy enhances a person's problem-solving capacities and capabilities. It helps us to analyze concepts, definitions, arguments, and problems. It contributes to our capacity to organize ideas and issues. When there are ideas, then to solve issues, to bring about those issues, to deal with questions of value, and to extract what is essential from large quantities of information. It helps us, on the one hand, to distinguish fine and subtle differences between views, and on the other hand, to discover common ground between opposing positions. It also helps us to synthesize a variety of views or perspectives into one unified whole. What does it do again? What are the benefits? What are the usefulness of philosophy? In communication skills, philosophy contributes uniquely to the development of express and communicative powers. It provides some of the basic tools of self-expression. For instance, skills in presenting ideas through well-constructed systematic arguments that other fields either do not use or use less extensively. Philosophy helps us to express what is distinctive in our views. It enhances our ability to explain that difficult material. It helps us to ambiguities and not only the vagueness from our writing and speech. So, perceiving powers. Philosophy provides training in the construction of clear formulations, good arguments, and not only that, appropriate examples. It thereby helps us to develop our ability to be convincing. We learn to build and defend our own views, to appreciate competing positions, and to indicate forcefully why we consider our own views preferable to alternatives. These capacities can be developed not only through reading and writing in philosophy, but also through philosophical dialogue, both within and outside the classroom. That is to so much a part of a thorough philosophical education. Then you can have your writing skills, which we'll be dealing with. Go and read that, understanding other disciplines. Not only that, development of sound methods of research analysis, which is very, very important. And then we'll be looking at ancient philosophy, the benefits of it. So, and our next lesson, I want you to go through those things and do your assignments on that. Thank you for listening. When next we meet, we'll be looking at the sources of knowledge, and looking at what the sources of knowledge in philosophy, what you can benefit from it, like we have discussed earlier on. We'll be looking at the history of philosophy and other things as we come up. Thank you. See you in the next class.